The screen flashed. Download complete. The evidence that would destroy her enemy was finally in her hands. But the sound that ripped Elara from her triumph wasn't a shout of victory. It was a faint, agonizing whine. At her feet, Maverick, her loyal shepherd, was collapsing, his gray coat turning dark with blood. He had taken the bullet meant for her. Footsteps echoed. They were closing in. Elara had seconds. Grab the drive and run, seize the justice she deserved, or abandon it all to save the only soul who had never betrayed her? The steady rhythm of Seattle rain against the glass was the soundtrack to Elara Vance's perfect life. From her corner office on the 35th floor, she analyzed market trends with a precision that had made her a star financial analyst before 30. Her desk was organized, her mind was clear, and her heart was full. This evening, that fullness was waiting for her at home. The apartment door opened to a familiar, joyful scramble. Maverick, a 2-year-old German shepherd, pushed his way toward her, his paws clicking excitedly on the hardwood floor. He was a striking dog, his coat a rare blend of silver gray and white, his ears perpetually alert. He was loyalty given form. "Hey, boy, did you miss me?" Elara murmured, sinking to her knees to rub his chest. His happy whine was the best sound in the world. We both did. Elara looked up, smiling. Rick Thorne, her fiancé, leaned against the kitchen doorway. He was an ambitious lawyer, handsome in the polished, effortless way of someone destined for success. He stepped forward and kissed her. "Tough day. Just complex," Elara said. "Nothing we can't handle." Life was a blueprint she had followed perfectly. A loving partner, a brilliant career, a loyal companion. The blueprint tore apart 3 days later. The call came from Spokane. Her father, a small business owner crushed by debt, had taken his own life. The rain outside Elara's window suddenly felt colder, heavier. Grief was a fog, but beneath it, Elara's analytical mind sparked. Her father was not a man to give up. She flew to Spokane, and in the bleak silence of his empty office, she found the anomalies. It took her 2 weeks, sleepless and fueled by coffee and rage, to trace the financial ruin back to its source. A predatory acquisition strategy by Julian Croft, the ruthless head of a massive tech corporation. It was unethical, borderline illegal, and she had the data to prove it. She brought the files back to Seattle, back to the apartment, where Maverick rested his heavy head on her lap, sensing her distress. "Rick," she said, her voice shaking, "they destroyed him. Croft did this." Rick took the files, his lawyer's gaze scanning the data. "Elara, this is incredible. And dangerous. Let me handle this." He mentioned Croft's lead counsel, Marcus Slade, as a man to be feared. "Don't talk to anyone. Give it all to me. I'll protect you." She trusted him. She gave him everything. 2 days later, 2 detectives arrived at her office. Elara Vance was arrested for embezzlement and corporate fraud. The trial was a blur of betrayal. Rick's firm represented Julian Croft. Marcus Slade, Croft's actual lawyer, presented Elara's own research as evidence against her, twisted to look like she was the one manipulating data. And Rick testified. He spoke of her erratic behavior since her father's death, suggesting she had fabricated the evidence against Croft to cover her own crimes. The guilty verdict was swift. Elara stood frozen as the sentence was read. She had lost her career, her freedom, and she realized as a cold dread settled in her stomach, the child she hadn't even known she was carrying. The world shrank to concrete walls and the metallic clang of cell doors. The Washington State Correctional Center for Women was a place designed to break spirits. Elara Vance, inmate 77409, was gone. The woman who replaced her was hollow, cold, and dangerously quiet. The loss of her child in the first brutal month, a tragedy born of prison violence, had chiseled away her soul, leaving only a core of ice. She learned to walk with her eyes down, but her senses alert. She learned that vulnerability was an invitation to predators. Her silence and intelligence eventually drew the attention of Gia. Gia was an older woman, perhaps in her late 60s, with sharp, assessing eyes the color of faded denim. She moved with an economy of motion that spoke of absolute control, and the other inmates gave her a wide berth. She was notorious, a prison legend. Few knew her full story. She was a master art thief and a brilliant self-taught student of human psychology. Gia watched Elara for weeks before approaching her in the library. "You understand numbers," Gia stated, her voice a low rasp. "I have." A complex financial dispute with someone inside. Elara, hungry for any mental challenge, analyzed the flow of commissary funds and favors. She identified a guard who was manipulating the internal system. Elara provided Gia the proof. The guard was removed, and Gia's control over the prison's ecosystem was secured. The payment was education. "They didn't just take your life, Piccola," Gia said one afternoon, sitting across from Elara in the yard. "They took your belief in the system. Good, the system is a lie." Gia began the lessons. It was not just defense, it was offense. She taught Elara applied psychology, how to read a person's greed, their fears, their vanities. She taught observation, to see the unseen key, the weak point in a security posture, the hesitation in a liar's eyes. She taught the theory of lockpicking, of bypassing alarms, and the complex chemistry of art forgery. During one late-night conversation, Gia's voice hardened with a rare bitterness. She spoke of the one partner who had ever outsmarted her, the man who betrayed her and left her to be captured years ago. "His name is Leo Sterling," Gia said. "Remember that name." After 3 years, Elara was paroled. The woman who walked out into the gray Seattle drizzle was not the one who had walked in. Gia gave her a final gift, a piece of paper with an address in a quiet suburb. "My contact found him," Gia said. Elara's heart hammered. Maverick. He hadn't been in a shelter. He'd been adopted by a new family. Elara watched the house for 2 days. She saw Maverick, now 5 years old and magnificent, playing in a fenced yard with 2 small children. He looked happy. A part of her, the old Elara, thought to leave him, to let him have this peace. But the new Elara, the one forged in ice, needed the only piece of her old life that was still pure. That night, she slipped the simple lock on the back gate. A soft whistle, one she had used since he was a puppy. Maverick's head shot up from the porch, his ears flattened, and then a low, hesitant wag. He padded across the grass, sniffing, and then he pushed his head hard against her hand. Elara unclipped his new collar, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered, to the dog, to the sleeping family. She led him silently into the darkness. It was theft. It was her first crime as a free woman, and the line she crossed felt like the only path home. Elara and Maverick lived in the shadows of Seattle, in a cash-only apartment in a neighborhood that specialized in anonymity. The sparse room was a far cry from her high-rise office, but it was a base of operations. Maverick, quiet and sensing her tension, was a constant warm presence at her feet. The ice in her core, forged in prison, was now focused. She had the skills from Gia, and she had her first target, Judge Arthur Carmichael. Judge Carmichael was a man of rigid routine and secret sorrows. Elara, using the observation skills Gia had honed, watched him for a week. He lived alone in a large house in Queen Anne. He was respected, seemingly untouchable. But Gia had taught her that everyone has a vulnerability. Elara found his, an online obituary for a golden retriever named Apollo, published 3 weeks prior. The judge's loneliness was now palpable. His daily walks in the local park were solitary and heavy. Elara became Anna Jensen, a freelance graphic designer new to the city, quiet and slightly shy. The next day, Anna was sitting on a park bench when the judge walked by. Maverick, under Elara's silent hand command, sat patiently by her side, a picture of calm obedience. On the second day, Maverick looked up as the judge passed, giving a soft, inquisitive whine. "He's beautiful," the judge said, his voice rough. He stopped, his gaze fixed on Maverick's intelligent, gray-furred head. "He's a good boy," Elara said, using the soft, warm tone she had practiced. "His name is Lobo." I just lost my Apollo," the judge admitted, the dam of his grief breaking for a stranger. They met by chance every day after that. The conversation started with dogs, stories of Apollo, observations about Lobo. Elara was the perfect listener, empathetic and understanding. She saw the trap closing. Maverick was the key. His well-behaved, gentle nature was irresistible to the grieving man. The judge, starved for connection, began to confide in Anna. He spoke of the pressures of his job, the isolation. After 2 weeks, the invitation came. "Anna, you and Lobo must come for dinner. It's been so long since I've had company." Elara smiled, her heart beating a cold, steady rhythm. "We would love to, Judge." The house was quiet, filled with photos of Apollo. While Maverick dutifully accepted affection from the judge, Elara excused herself. In his study, she worked quickly, her hands steady. Using a device supplied by one of Gia's contacts, she accessed his personal laptop. She didn't steal, she added. She fabricated transaction records, linking his private bank accounts to an offshore entity, the same one Marcus Slade had used to pay Rick. She planted the seed of bribery, making it look like the judge had been paid for her own conviction. She left an anonymous tip for the State Commission on Judicial Conduct the next morning. When the investigation began, Judge Carmichael was ruined. The digital trail was undeniable. His reputation evaporated. Elara watched the news from her small apartment, feeling nothing but the cold satisfaction of a task completed. Her revenge was purely psychological. She had used his deepest vulnerability, his love for a dog, to destroy him. There was no trace leading back to Anna Jensen or the ghost of Elara Vance. With the judge neutralized, Elara's focus narrowed. 2 names remained, Rick Thorne and Julian Croft. Rick was first. He was greedy, and Elara, the financial analyst, knew exactly how to weaponize that greed. She created a new, anonymous identity online, posing as a disillusioned employee within a rival tech firm. She meticulously fabricated a data trail suggesting an imminent secret merger, leaking it through channels she knew Rick monitored. It was a perfect trap, designed specifically for him. Rick, arrogant and desperate to reclaim the status he'd gained by betraying her, took the bait. He didn't just invest, he over-leveraged, pulling in markers and committing his new firm to the fraudulent deal. When Elara pulled the plug, leaking anonymous information to the SEC, the collapse was instantaneous. Rick Thorne was not just bankrupted, he was disbarred, disgraced, and utterly broken. Elara felt a fleeting, cold satisfaction before turning to the final name. Julian Croft was the real target. He was insulated by wealth and power. To harm him, she had to bypass his layers of lawyers and security and hit his ego. Gia's contacts proved invaluable. Elara commissioned a flawless forgery of the Whidbey Nocturne, a rare painting Croft had just acquired at auction for a staggering sum. The heist was set for the night of a major Seattle charity gala that Croft was hosting. Elara, dressed as a caterer, moved through the service passages of Croft's waterfront mansion. Maverick was her shadow, silent and almost invisible in the dim light. They bypassed the alarms, Gia's lessons on security systems merging with Elara's analytical mind. While Croft charmed his guests, Elara reached the gallery. The real painting was there, arrogant in its frame. She began the delicate process of the swap. Maverick stood guard at the door. Halfway through, a low rumble vibrated in Maverick's chest. He didn't bark, he simply pressed his body against Elara's leg, his ears flat. A guard doing an irregular sweep. Elara froze in the shadows. The guard passed, his radio chirping softly, oblivious. 10 minutes later, the forgery hung in place. Elara and Maverick slipped out, the real Nocturne concealed. The painting was in the hands of Gia's contacts before sunrise. The money, a fortune, was in Elara's offshore account by noon. The switch wasn't discovered for weeks, not until an art expert arrived for a routine insurance appraisal. Julian Croft did not react like the judge or Rick. He did not go to the police. Public humiliation was worse than financial loss. He was furious. This was a personal, sophisticated attack. He unleashed his private security and data mining teams. They were relentless. They tore apart the catering company's records. They analyzed security footage from the entire neighborhood. They traced the forgery back through a complex web, finding a single digital loose thread in the payment. It led them to a paroled financial analyst. It led them to Elara Vance. In her small apartment, Elara was packing, planning her new life, when her burner phone, the one Gia had given her, buzzed. A single text message from an unknown number. He knows. Run. The hunt had begun. Julian Croft's hunt forced Elara and Maverick into perpetual motion. They were ghosts, existing on cash, forged IDs, and the proceeds of Elara's new trade. She was no longer seeking revenge. She was surviving. Using Gia's network, she targeted the corrupt and the wealthy, those who, like Croft, lived above the law. The heists were clean, meticulous, and baffling to authorities. In an office in downtown Denver, one man was looking for a pattern, not a clue. Kaito Tanaka was a lead investigator for a high-end international insurer. He was Japanese-American, a slight man in a perfectly tailored suit who operated on logic and green tea. He was investigating the impossible theft of the Whidbey Nocturne. He found no fingerprints, no fibers, no forced entry. The professionalism bothered him. It was too clean. He expanded his search beyond the mansion, pulling traffic and security footage from a 10-block radius. Hours into the footage, he paused. 6 hours before the alarm was tripped, a blurry camera from a corner store captured a woman walking a dog. It was a German Shepherd, gray and white. It was nothing. But Kaito was meticulous. He cross-referenced the insurer's other clean, high-value thefts from the past 6 months. A jewelry vault in Portland, a data file in San Francisco. And there, blocks away, hours before each event, was the same ghost. A woman and a gray German Shepherd. It was a signature. Kaito Tanaka now had his hunt. Elara's current target was in Denver, a tech mogul's penthouse safe. According to Gia's intel, it held bearer bonds. That night, Elara worked on the safe's digital keypad, the complex algorithm challenging her financial mind. Maverick lay at the doorway to the study, not sleeping, but on silent watch. Suddenly, Maverick's head lifted. A low, almost imperceptible rumble started in his chest. He rose silently to his feet, facing the shadows by the balcony. "He's good," a voice said, smooth as velvet. Elara spun around, her heart seizing. A man stepped out of the darkness. He was tall, dressed in black, and moved with a grace that was almost feline. He was handsome, with a charming, almost amused smile. "I bypassed the motion sensors on the terrace," he said, "but I can't fool a shepherd. We seem to be at an impasse. That's my safe." "You're mistaken," Elara said, her voice steady ice. "Am I?" He took a step closer. "We both know that keypad has a secondary silent alarm. You trip it, I trip it, we both get caught. Or we work together." It was a dance of tense negotiation. He was a professional, clearly. They worked in tandem, his skills complementing hers, and cracked the safe in minutes. As they divided the bonds, the attraction was electric, a dangerous spark of recognition. "Leo Sterling," he said, extending a hand. Elara's blood turned to ice. It was him. The name Gia had spoken with such bitterness in the prison yard. The man she had sworn to find. The target she was indebted to destroy. She was trapped. Kaito, the hunter, was behind her. Croft, the monster, was behind her. And now Leo, the debtor, was right in front of her. The debt to Gia would have to wait. Elara had found the leverage, a single encrypted data file, a digital ledger of Julian Croft's entire shadow enterprise. It was buried in a private server vault, and it was the key to his absolute destruction. It was the one thing Kaito Tanaka wanted, and the one thing Croft would kill to protect. "This is the endgame, Leo," Elara said. They stood in the sterile chill of the subterranean vault. "You get the data, I get Croft, we both get free." "A clean transaction," Leo agreed, his eyes focused. The unspoken truce hung between them. Elara's fingers flew across the terminal. Maverick stood by the door, a silent gray statue. He sensed them first. A low rumble vibrated in his chest. "Company," Elara whispered, just as the main door hissed open. Kaito Tanaka stood there, flanked by 2 armed men. "Elara Vance, it's over." Simultaneously, A secondary entrance burst open. 3 men in black tactical gear, Croft's mercenaries, entered the room and immediately opened fire. The vault erupted into chaos, the air filled with the sharp, percussive reports of gunfire. Leo shoved Elara toward the server. "Get the drive!" Kaito yelled, "We're federal agents!" But the mercenaries ignored him, focusing on Elara and the server. Kaito took cover, a dark stain spreading on his shoulder. Elara jammed the portable drive into the port, the data transfer agonizingly slow. One of Croft's men broke free, leveling his rifle directly at her. There was no time to react. There was only a blur of gray fur and a desperate, protective snarl. Maverick launched himself through the air, hitting the gunman's chest just as the man pulled the trigger. The sound of the shot was heavy, muffled. Maverick didn't yelp. He collapsed to the concrete, a ragged cry caught in his throat. "Mav!" Elara screamed. She abandoned the server, scrambling to his side, the drive forgotten. "Elara, the drive! We have to go!" Leo yelled, grabbing her arm. Croft's men were reloading. She looked at the drive, still downloading, her victory, her freedom. She looked at Leo, her complicated future. Then she looked at Maverick, his labored breathing painting small, red clouds on the floor. He was the only thing that was real. He was the only part of her soul she hadn't sacrificed. "Go!" she shouted at Leo, her voice breaking. "Take it! Just go!" Leo stared at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and sudden, profound understanding. He snatched the drive, just as the transfer completed, and vanished into the smoke-filled corridor. From across the room, Kaito Tanaka, wounded and leaning against the wall, watched it all. He saw his case, the data, disappear. He saw the country's most wanted thief abandon her prize. He saw her choice. Elara ignored the bullets. She gathered Maverick's heavy, bleeding body into her arms and ran, disappearing down a service tunnel. She drove, one hand pressed hard against Maverick's wound, the other gripping the wheel. "Stay with me, boy. Just stay with me." She found the address Gia had once given her, an emergency contact. A veterinarian working out of a hidden clinic in the industrial district, a man who asked no questions. As the vet took Maverick onto a steel table, Elara stepped back, her hands covered in his blood. She was empty-handed. Leo was gone. The data was gone. Croft was still out there. And Kaito Tanaka knew her face, knew her weakness. She had lost everything again, but as she watched the vet work, she knew she had saved the only thing that mattered. In the end, Elara's choice reminds us that when all the noise of the world fades, the only thing that's real is the loyal heart beating beside us. That bond is our true anchor, the one thing worth sacrificing everything for. If you felt that connection, we invite you to become part of our pack by subscribing. We read every single comment and would be honored to hear your own story of loyalty. Our next narrative is ready for you now. Just tap the video that has appeared on the screen.